Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. And as you may have noticed on the last episode, we did say we were going to be talking about a BBC News article and kind of got a bit sidetracked. Therefore, we're going to go through this article today. Roger, can you just give a bit of a recap of what it was about?
Well, we started talking about walking and then we went into running and from there. So this was an article last week which was talking about it's a follow-on from some research which suggested or showed that slower walking, it talks about 45, at age 45 as an indicator for either a health status or the headline is slow walking at 45, a sign of faster aging. So what they did is a study in New Zealand where they tracked people from the 1970s. I'll put down the link if you're watching this on YouTube. But they took 1,000 people born in the 70s and followed them and tracked them to 45. And they marked that there was a walking speed test that they did, found that certain individuals were slower at 45 than others. And what they then went on to do, together with other physical tests and cognitive tests, suggested that there was a useful sign or signature of a lower health status or poor health status coming, whereas they look at usually over 65s because of balance and muscle strength and other lung function, etc., of a poor health outcome. So it's kind of hinting that it's potentially a sign or an indicator of, and also they did it with IQ tests and scans and suggested that actually brain size was smaller. So some people had lost some brain size by 45. So from a health perspective and a clinical perspective, it's kind of deemed as, is that a potentially a indicator in mid age of potentially other health issues developing or coming down the line. So I know from this on that most people, you're not old enough yet, but most 45-year-olds and stuff are going to be suddenly either trying to walk quicker or suddenly going, I'm now not walking as quick. I must be unhealthy. So it was quite interesting to talk around that concept.
I think first off, if you are walking slower, then what can you do about it? And looking at other factors that are going on in the lifestyle as well, because coming from a background of coaching males and females that are stressed out over 40 and gone through quite a lot of stuff in their life, that if they see that there's some study that says they slow down, first off they might think, I'm a slow walker anyway, so what were they doing in their 30s and what in their 20s?
Yeah.
I'm a slow walker as it is, therefore it's slowing down with that. But also what other factors have gone into it, because yes, we can see IQ and everything like that, but chances are at 45, you know what your intelligence level is to a degree, without even going into an actual IQ test and whether that's flawed as well. Because again, like the way people do IQ tests, some people, that person's got a really high IQ, but the actual test itself isn't necessarily an accurate marker. It's like having BMI for obesity.
And walking speed itself is not really a significant marker to judge someone's overall health status. But it's an interesting indicator, and what for me that it highlights is that potentially you're already picking up in mid 40s of what's potentially coming down the line as we get even older. So they're talking about the aging process, but already then you're paying the price for what's been going on for many since childhood. So they hint a bit about childhood and even from some people have a better start in life than others. Whether they mean by that is nutritionally or developmentally or in a social setting or a family network setting or so. So it's really interesting because it shows that potentially a lot of degenerative issues are picked up more in the 60s from a clinical perspective. But what this is highlighting is saying, hey, we've actually seen that process come through in different markers at a younger age. So for me, it highlights even hugely is that what are people doing in their teens and 20s? Really, when we're in our 20s, we can sleep less, party hard, do whatever, but what price are we paying? So, it does highlight to some people is that you're not bulletproof, these things have consequences, and walking slower. But it doesn't necessarily mean that if you are walking out there and you just always do a bit of a slower walker, that you've got some major health issues. I think that you've got to watch out for the knee-jerk reaction the other way. But if you're really stressed, life is tough, you've got some mental health challenges going on, you're not going to be walking around you're not going to be striding out.
No.
If life is good, you've just had that hot date, you've just got that business deal, you've got a bit of swagger, you've got to stride, you're going to stride out, chest's going to go up, you're going to walk. So it can be also an indicator of something really recent, but if it's consistent or it's been really good and then it's dropped off, it might be a sign of other health issues coming also, before they become clinically, so lung issues or, it's really like all these things with research, it raises, good research should make you ask more questions. It doesn't give you the answer. And through accumulation of different research, you then deduct trends and ideas, and they are always going to shift and change. So nothing's actually up. So this doesn't actually clinically tell us much more than we probably already know. But I would not want anyone who's suddenly saying, well, I've always walked a bit slower than my brother or my sister, maybe I've got a major health issue. But it does highlight that if you haven't been active, you're a heavy smoker, you're carrying loads of stress, all the classic lifestyle things for 15, 20 years, it's likely that you're not going to be walking up, outside here we've got a nice little hill. You're probably going to be fading as you go up that hill compared to someone whose health status is higher.
But also as well, it's interesting to note what they say about these health issues come on in their 60s usually. Now, it would be interesting to see out of the people that have said the health issues come on, how many of those people are retiring in their 60s? And is it after retirement? Because we know that a lot of times when people retire and they don't keep some activity up, whether it's brain activity and physical activity, so psychological activity, they degenerate quickly because it's the use it or lose it principle.
Yeah.
And that's when a lot of these serious health issues come into play. And also with the people now and the working age we have, there's much more office-based jobs, so people are more sedentary. Therefore, are they getting slower with their walking because their health is getting better because they're more sedentary? Yeah. And if they had more active jobs like generations past, would they then actually be walking faster anyway? So
probably the two most common feedback things which I have with patients, mainly along those musculoskeletal patients who are over 65, but certainly when they get to 70 above. Two main things: flexibility and balance. Now we know one of the worst health outcomes from an injury or so for the elderly is a fall and a broken hip. The mortality rate after that, over 80 years old, I think is really high. They don't recover. They recover from the surgery, but they don't necessarily recover their lifestyle back, and they lose confidence and stuff. Now, balance and flexibility are two things that you can influence. We know we're probably not going to have the same balance and flexibility at 65 than we are when we're going to be 15 or 20 years old. But it's interesting because you say that, is that through most people's working life, and certainly with computers and certainly with cars and that, the number one thing we find is most people lose their flexibility and their balance way sooner than they become aware of it. So we see it when we do assessments, especially flexibility. So we're already picking up those markers way before the person in their natural life starts going, I'm bending over to put my shoes and socks on at 60 or 70, but balance is a big one. And balance is feedback through the nervous system. So you 100% right is when people retire, it's also how active they've got to keep feeding those, stimulating those balance things. But a lot of the times they're not doing it in the first place through when they're in their 40s.
Could that be one of the reasons that the health? Well, it's definitely one of the reasons that health is deteriorating to a degree.
Neuromuscular health and certainly neurological health relies on stimulation of the brain. So it's not only about the brain stimulating and sending. A lot of people say, well, the brain sends out information. It does, but a vast majority of the brain relies on feedback back in. So, stimulation doesn't necessarily come that I sit and watch something on TV. It's not very stimulating from a sensory perspective. It's just visual and a bit of auditory. But balance is from movement and from stimulating. So I get some patients to brush teeth. When they brush their teeth, they stand on one foot. And these are the office workers, so they're not necessarily going out and having to go and walk loads. It's just finding balance boards, people going to the gym. Balance is huge, but you have to stimulate all the joints in the body to keep stimulating the brain. And the brain then thrives and lights up because of more stimulation. So it's not only stimulation of reading a book or watching something. So if people go out and they're older and they're walking, it does, stimulates, cardiovascular exercise and that, but it starts younger. And I think those people who set up activities in their probably 20s, but mainly 30s and 40s, generally will have better outcomes in their 60s. And I think what this is highlighting is that now they're picking up people in the 40s. This highlights what's going on even earlier. Or we're seeing a trend shift further because generally as a society, Western society, we're getting more sedentary. A lot more people. We've done some office screenings recently, and it's not uncommon to have some people who are in their 30s, they're not exercising. You ask them what they do outside, they like socializing, they go watch movies, they may, but they're not actively involved in sports, or they're not moving as much. So maybe we're also seeing the trend that we're starting to pick these things up earlier.
Yeah, and it's taking ownership of it as well.
Hugely.
Because people know
it's an individual problem being multiplied, so it becomes a society.
People get so far that they're overwhelmed about having to pull it back. So they're so unhealthy as such, or they know they have to do so much to improve their health, to lose weight, to do these things that are going to help them. But they're overwhelmed. And I feel that if we can just move more, just go for a walk, do the minimum, as we're talking about, maybe we'll see a study in 10 years' time that says that now it's gone to 55. And it's gone back up again rather than 45. Well,
unfortunately, I think you're looking at it. This follows on a bit from what's been bounced around in the last decade. Is that this generation, the kids' generation, is the first generation where the health outcomes or the life expectancy is less than the generation before. And there's certainly an element of more sedentary, but there's also still as much opportunity to get involved in either sports or hobbies. But I think there is a tendency for it to be easier now and to be less active. And if you've got someone, when you say to them in their late 40s and 50s, you need to get out and walk, and unless they really are motivated, it's very hard to ingrain that. But if I've got patients who are in their, I've got one guy who's amazing. He's just had his 90th birthday.
Wow.
And he's out strimming. He's got an acre land and he's out strimming, mowing, chopping down trees. He's done that all his life. He knows no difference. But if you have the other flip side of someone who's worked, driven a car, sat on a computer, watched TV, and done that for up until the age of 50, and said, right, and we need to now get you moving. They could probably still physically do it, but mentally, for that to become ingrained as a regular part of their lifestyle, I would imagine, be very hard.
Definitely.
So, are you walking quickly or walking slower now? I think it would be interesting.
Or hopping along.
So have a look at the article. I'd be interested into what you think. It does also hint a little bit of that article. Is if you read down certainly on the BBC link, then the solution is a low-calorie diet and looking at treatments involving some medication.
Let's not go down
so that. It's always also interesting of where the hook is with that, with research and articles. For us, it's lifestyle. It's about graining activity. It doesn't mean that you have to try and like we spoke last week of trying to break the marathon in 2 hours and stuff. It's about movement and lifestyle.
And not falling off a treadmill.
And not falling off a treadmill. Has anyone done anything? Let us know if you've done. I'm still intrigued with it.
You might get some new patients out of it.
Well, yeah, we're here
It's a
to
good
help you
marketing
stay.
technique.
We're here to help you stay on the treadmill. We're here to serve. Right, have a good week. Give us some feedback as always, and if there's any topics or anything of interest bouncing around that confuse you, and we can have a little chat around. We're more than happy. As you've already worked out, we just start and we can't stop.
You just go.
All right.
Take
See you
care.
soon. Take
Bye.
care.